looking at how do we prepare the data for analysis, the first step, which is the data cleaning step. So the analysis plan tells us that what we need to do first, and I'm going to get rid of this little space by double clicking here. Okay. Is each variable will be checked for erroneous entries, and any errors will be documented and if possible fixed. Okay, so I am going to create a data cleaning worksheet. So what I told you guys to do is you just always add sheets by hitting this little plus with a circle around it at the bottom. And that sheet is going to end up looking like this. But what I want to do right now is I'm going to remove this. So we're going to build this slowly. So in here, I wrote data cleaning notes, and then I wrote data dimensions, rows and columns. And we talked about how do you find the number of rows, and that is using the COUNTA function. So let me delete that. We're going to go through that. So this is going to equal COUNTA. And notice that Excel's trying to remind me or help me find the function I'm looking for. So it gives me some options down below. The blue one, COUNTA, is highlighted. I can use my arrow keys to go to a different one. But once I have the one I want, I can just hit tab and it changes it all to capital letters and gives me an open parentheses. And this is the way Excel is telling me that it knows that this is a function and recognizes it now. Now with this blinking black bar on the formula, I can go anywhere I want and put in a range of values. So down below, you see a little white box and it's giving me hints as to what I need to do to use this function. So I can complete what is needed here by pointing to the worksheet where the data is, and it's going to count A is going to count anything. So I'm going to count anything starting with A2 because I don't want to count the variable name if I'm trying to count how many rows are in my data. Now I can just drag this down, but that's going to take a long time, especially if you have a lot of data. So it was better to use the scroll bar on the right, scroll to the bottom of your data, and on that last data cell in this column of data where I'm counting how many rows are here, I'm going to hit shift, hold shift down while I click, and now I've selected all that. Now up here in the formula, I need to put the closing parentheses and enter, and this is going to pop me back over to the worksheet where I started to put that in, and I see that my count of the number of rows is 200. Now, I can use that same function to get the columns because it doesn't have to be a vertical column. It can be any shape. So in here, let's say I'm gonna remove this. Let's say I want to go in here and I want to use that COUNTA again. I can say equals count, and here are all the count functions. I come down to COUNTA. I hit tab, and let's say I don't really remember, and this is not helping me. So one of the things I can do is hit this little F with an X, which helps me fill in what's needed in this function. It can help me find functions. I'll show you that in a minute. So here it says, okay, what are the numbers? What do you want to put in here? Since it's got a blinking black vertical line, I can just go ahead and go over to where I was and get the data I want in there. The other thing I can do is use this pop out. Either one will work. So if I use the pop out, it's just hiding everything else in that little window and just saying, okay, go and get the data. So now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select the variable names, which is going to give me the number of columns in my data. And then I use this little down arrow, like, okay, put this in where the function is. And then we're going to say, okay. So it's set up so if you wanted to, you could add another range of data, but all we want is the number of columns. So we'll say, okay. Okay, so we get that there's 14 columns. Now the number of data values. Now let's say I forget all about COUNTA and I just know that I need to put something in here and I don't remember what it is. I can either go to the function, insert function button, or I can go up here to the formulas and I can look for insert function here. So there's two places where that is. I can look at some of the functions that are available in these library, if you will, and they're broken down by categories. I can also look at recently used, and I can see some of the functions I've used recently. I'm going to go to insert function, and then in here I say it says type a brief description of what you want to do, and then click go. So let's say I want to count cells, and the category I want is all because I'm not really sure. So I'm going to say go, and it says please rephrase your question. So I'm just going to say count. I'll say go, and then now we have all the count functions. So count A is, and down below it tells me what each one does. So I could possibly use some kind of combination of count if, where I'd say count if not blank. That's very complicated. So the easiest one to do is just count A, count anything that's not empty. Now, what about count? Count, if you click on it, it says it's going to count the number of cells in a range that contain numbers. And that's not really what I want because a lot of my data is categorical. So that's not really what I want for this data where I want to count all the non-empty cells. So I'm going to use count A. And once again, it's going to now give me basically it's some default entry here, which I don't want. So I'm going to select that and delete it. And now I'm going to put in the rectangle of values that I want to count. So I'm going to come back over here to the data, and the rectangle of values that I want to put in here is going to go, I'm going to go to the very top left corner of the rectangle of values. So A2, then I'm going to scroll, take the scroll bar and come down to the far right corner and hit shift and click, and I'll be getting now this whole rectangle selected. And I'll say that's okay. And now I have that the number of data values is 2797. Okay, I put a little note to have changes to the data will be in green. And the first thing we're going to be looking at is the errors, the number of errors, some notes about those, the number, and the percent. So, and that's again because in my analysis plan, we're going to, each variable we check for erroneous entries. So we're going to check each one for erroneous entries. So we need to bring each variable name over here. So I'm going to come over here to the customer data. I'm going to copy the variable name. So I'm selecting by holding down my cursor and dragging. And I think everybody at this point, I believe, knows how to do that. If you don't, please see me. Okay, so here I've selected the column, the variables across the top. There's a green solid rectangle outline. And I'm going to copy this by using Control C or Command C or right clicking and selecting copy. Then I'm going to go to where I want my variables and I'm going to paste them here. So here I can paste or I can do the shortcut for paste is just Control V or Command V. So now that I'm here, what I would like to do is make a little table for my errors that's a little easier to read. And you can do this maybe many different multiple ways. I just want to show you that there is the ability to change, since see the green rectangle is outlining what I've selected. I'm going to apply this orientation to what I've selected by clicking on the angle counterclockwise. And that angles everything up. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a table. And notice I also read on my analysis plan, maybe I can just shorten this up for right now. So maybe we can see them, that I'm going to need to count missing values are also going to need to be documented, tallied, and the percentage of the missing provided. So it says both overall and per variable. Okay, so I'm going to include missing, the percent missing, and what decisions we're going to make with those missing variables. I think it goes without saying, and I sort of skipped over this, that you are going to first read your analysis plan carefully, especially if you're not the author. Because if you're not the author, you want to, if you are the author, you know what's in there. And if you're not the author, you need to read through it carefully to kind of make sure you're doing what was intended. Okay, so at least I know this much is going to be needed. So, and it says overall and per variable. So I'm actually going to add total here, because it sounds like we need to also include a total. Notice that that doesn't have the underline. So I'm going to go up here to home ribbon and to the one that looks like a little window. And I'm going to choose the bottom border on that one. Okay, not that that matters too much because we're getting ready to change it, but just to keep everybody clear. I also then added the words missing, percent missing, and then the decision. And I added a line all the way across by selecting those cells and clicking the bottom border. Why don't we go ahead and change that to a thick bottom border, since we're separating that from the rest of the table. Now, we may have to do that again. Sometimes when you format things differently, you overwrite things, but let's see what happens. So I'm going to select all of this, and I'm going to go back to that home font group and look for that little Windows icon, which is the borders, and I'm going to go to all borders. Yeah, and it got rid of the thick one. See, it overwrote. So that happens sometimes. So let's go back and put that one in as thick. So we're going to come back here and we'll add this now as a thick bottom border. Okay. All right. So now we are going to go and look for errors in each one of these variables. And I'm going to need to see my data to be able to make any decisions about it. So I'm going to go to View, New Window. And now I have these two versions of the same workbook. I want to put them side by side. So I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to go to Arrange All, and I'm going to say Vertical. And if I have possibly other Excel workbooks open, I don't want them on the side by side view. So I'm going to click on Windows of Active Workbook. And I'll hit OK, and I'll get these two side by side. And then on the left, I'm going to pick my data. And then over here on the right is where I'm going to start looking at filling this in. So the first thing I want to do is go to customer ID. That's my first variable. And I want to see if there's any errors in it. What I told you is you're going to go over here to the drop down and use the drop down filter buttons, which get toggled on and off in your data from the data tab with this filter button. We'll turn them on, off, or on. So I want them on, and I'm going to use them to look through each distinct entry in this column to see if there's anything wrong or weird to me. Now, obviously, this is why we check each other's work and we QC, because someone could miss something. Here, everything looks good to me, so I'm going to say that this is clear. Or you could say clear, or maybe clean. So now I'm going to come over here to sex, and I'm going to look for any erroneous entries in sex. And I see that female is spelled wrong in at least one case, and somebody put man, at least one person put man. Until I don't know how many errors there are until I select them. So I'm going to unselect everything and then select the problem entries. And then I click on that, and I've subsetted my data to only where the variable sex is one of the ones I chose. And I see that thankfully it's only 2 data entries are impacted. What I want to do now is fully document this. So I'm going to come over here to sex, and I'm going to say that there's, you don't have to write the part about the 2 typos, but you can. And what I was showing you in class is that I had shown you previously how to do wrap text. Now I'm going to show you how to do a carriage return within a cell. So on a Windows, it's Alt Enter. On a Mac, it's Option Enter. And you have to hold down either the Alt key or the Option key while you hit Enter. So I'm holding down the Alt key, I hit Enter, and right over here on the right, it gave me a carriage return. So I'm going to put in here, what are the errors I found? I found man I'm going to hit that Alt Return again, and I'm going to type female spelled wrong. Okay. Now, once I hit enter, it auto adjusted the height of this row and is giving me, it's allowing me to see everything that's in there. Notice that up here in the formula bar, I only see the first row. So one way that I can fix that is with this, it dropped down to the right where it makes that window bigger. You can see that. Of course, now it makes my worksheet smaller because now I've made this ribbon part at the top take up more of my screen. So, you know, there's hopefully a sweet spot for you where you're happy with it. Now, the notes is where we're going to kind of put what we're going to do. So these are kind of notes about what we found this problem. Now we're going to document what we're going to do. So this is going to be reviewed by our client, or in some cases by your team or by your supervisor, or another colleague in our case, and many times in reality. Okay, so here we're going to say, all right, well, we're going to take that first one, man, and it's totally, there's no question really that this was intended to be put in as male. If there is ambiguity, then you need to have a broader group of people agree, all the people on the team, everyone involved, on what you're going to be changing the data to. But in this case, it's really easy to say that this is just an erroneous entry. So I'm going to put that in. I'm going to put in female as female. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. And this one I didn't, I can make my columns wider if I want to, like I, for some reason, think that that would be helpful, but you don't have to do that. Okay. The number of records affected, or values of record affected here, is 2. And what percentage of all the the variables values in the variable sex does the 2 represent? So we know from reading our analysis plan that everything is set up on the percentage of the data, not the actual number 2. So we need to know what 2 is. So we're going to get that by converting that to a percentage of our data. Now, there are 2 ways to think about this. 2 is a percent of the almost 3,000 data values, or 2 is a percent of the number of values in sex, or the number of records. In some cases, you want both. In this case, we're going to start out by considering what percentage of the overall of the records are impacted by this. And that's usually a higher percentage, which is kind of the one that we're concerned about. So it makes sense that we want that one. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take, and we got to get 2 divided by, so I put equals, and then I use my arrow keys to point to the cell that has the 2, and then I'm going to divide that by the cell that has the 200. And I have what's called a formula in using relative references. So the first thing I want to do is, since I want this to be a percent, I'm going to go up here to the home ribbon and come over to, there's a big percent here anyway, there's a big giveaway, but it's in the number section is where we format. And we have all the different ways we could format this and how many decimal places. So I'm going to choose the percent symbol. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it with no decimals right now. I think we may end up needing to change that at some point, but we'll leave that for now. Okay, now when I click up here on the formula bar, and I don't need it so big anymore, I can just click up here. You'll see that Excel is going to help me check my own work by putting boxes around, colored boxes that correspond to the color of the font here, so I can see what the formula is doing. Notice that if I copy this formula, let's say this was a 7, just making up this number for right now. If I copy this formula over, what's it pointing to? It's pointing to the cell right above, divided by the cell up here, 5 rows above in C3. So this is C8 divided by C3. If I copy this formula, these are relative references. It's going to adjust I move the formula now over one column to the right. And if I copy it here, everything that was a C turned into a D. And so Excel is able to kind of shift your formulas over for you and adjust them as needed. But I don't really want to know. This is nonsensical, right? To divide 7 by the number of columns if 7 was how many values in the variable race were messed up. So that doesn't really make sense anyway, but it's wrong for what I'd want to calculate. So I can come up here and I can click on the formula bar and I can fix it by dragging this red box over here to the denominator I actually want, because I want to take 7 and I want to divide by how many values are in the data. So I could get that, and then that'll give me the correct percent. The thing is, if I have to do this for all of that, I can do this much, much easier and less likely to forget to do it and make a mistake by, instead of having that red box having to be fixed every time, I can make it permanently C3. The way we do that is with the absolute reference, which we do by putting dollar signs in front of the things we don't want to change when we move the formulas to new cells. So in this case, we want actually the entire location, the row 3 and the column C, to be always what we're dividing by. So we're gonna, we want dollar signs in front of both the C and the 3. And to do that, Excel has a kind of, you can type it in, there's nothing wrong with typing it in, but you can also use function F4, which is going to automatically put those dollar signs in for you. If you hit function F4 again, it's going to toggle through the options of where you want the dollar sign. So in this case, if I copied this formula, it would keep it in row 3, but it would change the column. And you can experiment with this by copying formulas over with different dollar sign locations and seeing for yourself how this impacts things. But it's going to toggle through all the ones and going all the way back to just no dollar signs to a relative reference. And then I'm going to toggle it one more time. So I have this permanent reference here. Okay, and I'm going to actually copy that formula back over here. So now it stays as 1%. I'm going to highlight this because this was all fake anyway. I was just showing you how the formula references work, and I'm going to right click and go to clear contents. Okay. Now that we've done that, the next step is to actually show exactly in the data how this is going to change. And we're going to do that by creating a new worksheet. And this new worksheet, if I can get to it, should be called renamed, and we'll call this data edits. At the top of any worksheet, if it's not exceedingly obvious by the name at the bottom, we would put a little description of what that worksheet does or is for, and why it exists. So we're going to say data changes. How about this? Changes to data values and records deleted. And that's what we're going to capture inside this worksheet. That's the title of the worksheet in a sense. And we're going to have 2 sections in this worksheet. So the first section is going to be where we're going to be very clear about what we change and what variable gets changed and how exactly it gets changed. So here we're going to say the following changes were made to the data, to the following values were changed as indicated, or something like that. I think I did a little different in class. All right, so here is where we're going to put in what was changed. Now, I could technically just go in and copy just the first 2 columns where I have the customer ID and the variable that's got the problem. But if you start doing this for different variables, it starts to just take a lot of time and a lot of bookkeeping, and you got to keep it straight. I think it's easier just to come over here on the green and get the whole row. So I'm going to just select one and then drag that down by holding down my mouse key until I've gotten the 3 rows I want. And now I'm going to copy those over here. So I copied those over. And one of the things we notice is that the birth date is got a bunch of hashtags, and the income has hashtags and the spending. Now we don't really care because right now we're focusing on fixing sex, the erroneous entries in sex. But if we wanted to be able to see what was in here, we could highlight D, and there's many ways to fix this. So one is just manually grabbing the bar and sliding it over. Another way to have it figure out how far over to go is to just get that vertical bold bar with the arrows going left and right and double clicking it. And that'll auto adjust that. Another way to do several is, let's say I want to select all of these, and I want these to be I want to be able to read everything that's in them with no overlap. So I can go up to Home, to Cells, to Format, and Auto Fit Column Width. So now I can see everything that's in there, and I have to actually scroll over to see everything. Okay. Now that's just a little bit of formatting. Now we want to focus now on on the errors. So this is where we're going to actually show what we're going to change them to. So what we need is to put some little bit of space just to the right of these variable values so that we can catalog or document exactly how they're going to change. But right now there isn't, there's no space here. So this is how much space I need. So I select how much space I need. And I'm going to right click, insert, and this is going to say shift cells right. That's the one I want because I want to shift these 3 rows of data over one. So I'm going to say, okay, now everything's shifted to the right. Notice this birth date now got moved to a smaller column. So it's now, again, hashtags. Okay, but we fixed that. All right, now we have a little blank space here where we can actually document what we're going to do. So this is going to be male. This is going to be female. And I'm going to put a box around what it was and what it's going to change to. And I'm going to go in my Home tab to the font box to the paint bucket, and you can select a color to highlight. I'm going to select yellow. So it's very clear and easy to catch what exactly was changed in this data. All right. Now that we've documented this, now we're going to actually change the data, but we're never, ever, ever going to touch the original data. And this should have been renamed. Okay. So we're never going to change the original data. So we're going to make a copy of this, which is where we're going to actually be putting the changes. So back here, I can either copy it or remove the filters and then copy, or it doesn't really matter. So let's just go ahead and remove the filters. So up here in the Data tab, in this ribbon, you'll go to the Sort and Filter, and just to the upper right of the big filter funnel, there's one with a little red X. Click on that, and that clears all your filters. If you copy this data over with those on it, it will still copy it all over. So it doesn't matter in what order you do it. Okay, but here I am now going to make a copy of this data. And so I'm going to right click, come up to Move or Copy, click on Create a Copy, and I'm going to move it to the end. Now, when I do that, it's going to make a copy of where I'm at, and it can't have the same name, so it's going to add a 2 on the end. So I'll say, okay. Now this is the worksheet that's now been added. And in order to navigate my worksheets or to see what's there, I can come over here to the lower left corner of my Excel sheet. And if you scroll, it'll tell you kind of what to do. It'll give you some hints, some shortcuts, but you can always right click and see all the worksheets that are in your workbook. And you can pick the one you want to go to and hit OK, and it pops you over there. So here we are now in our copy, and we're going to rename this clean data. All right, now let's go back and actually fix the problem that's over here on the right that we've indicated is what we're going to do. So we got to go back over here to sex, and we're going to filter female and man. And now right in here, we're going to change this to male, and we're going to change this to female. And let's go ahead and save this. We've now fixed our first variable. And now we're going to do everything we just did again on the next variable. So let's go back, and first thing on the left, let's get back to the original data. And on the right, let's go over to data cleaning. And we said we're going to make any changes to the data. We're going to highlight that in green. So let's go ahead and highlight this in green because this is what we've changed right now. So again, I'm going to go up in the Home tab to the font group, to the bucket, and I'm going to select like a light green font. I could have, done like a light pink or whatever color, doesn't matter. You don't have to match my colors. The idea is to make it visible. You don't want to overly color things because then it's like you're looking at like, I don't know, some abstract art thing and your brain feels like it's going to explode. So you want to keep it simple and clean. Okay, so the next variable we're going to look at is race. So let's go over here to race, and we're going to click on the filter button, and we're going to check to see if anything in race is off. And it looks like everything is fine there. Notice it has blanks. I don't care about blanks yet. I will care very much about blanks when I get to the part of our data cleaning where we're considering what to do about missing values. But right now I don't care. So this looks good. I'm going to say that's okay. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say this is clean. Okay, now I'm going to go over to birth date. And birth date, Excel knows their dates and recognizes the values in here as dates and tries to help me by grouping them by year. So as I scroll through this, I can see all the data values that I have for various years. If I open up any one of them, I'll see all the months that were in 1999. And I can click any of these months open and see days that were in August, for example. So we have the 5th and the 12th in our data. So it's a nice way to quickly look through your data if it's formatted as dates. And in this particular case, we could argue, and I think it's a legitimate argument that this is going to maybe be hiding errors. Right off the bat, I can see I'm going to unselect all. I'm going to select this 2962, which I know has to be wrong. And at the very bottom, we see that there's this 1902 year, which has got to be wrong. Now, technically, you really would need to go through each one of these and make sure there's nothing weird, like nothing like 57 or something crazy, right? So you kind of want to check if there's something like that. I have a feeling, yeah, if you had something like a 57 or a weirdly, or a month in here that would not work, I think Excel would capture that. Let's test that theory. Okay, so this is just an aside to test how dates work. Let's say I'm going to select all. And I'm going to create another little worksheet just to see if this works. I'm going to grab a few of these dates. I'm just going to copy them over just to see how this works. Okay. Now I'll just say some dates. All right, so actually, let me move this whole thing. So I'm using Control X, Control X, which is cut, or Command X, and paste, moving it up here. And let me put a funnel on this. Okay, so I got this as some dates like this, and it is identifying the days, the month, the year. Okay. Now, what happens if we were to go in and say 15? Because 15 would be a mistake, right? So we say we put that in, and then we look in here, and it doesn't know how to convert it to a date. Okay, so that's good. So it won't artificially create artificial months for us. The other thing is what happens if we have a date that doesn't make sense. So let's go back to making this a 5. And let's say the date is 49. Okay, let's see what happens with that. So again, when we go in here, it doesn't do the date breakdown. Okay, so we have just confirmed that if it is collapsing the dates within a year, everything inside is good. So that's great. Okay, so I'm going to delete this little worksheet we did. This was just to convince ourselves that it works well. So that means when I come over here, all the ones that are collapsed as years are, everything inside them is good. So now I'm going to select these two and say, okay. Okay, now I see that we have two weird dates. So I want to copy those over into birth date. And so here I'm going to write down what I found that was an error. So that's 11, 19, 29, 62. And now I'm going to use the Alt Enter or Option Enter to give me a carriage return within the cell. And I'm going to put the 21/1/1902. And I don't like the way that looks in there, so I'm going to make this column just a little wider so I can see it. And notice now I have extra space, but that's because that's coming over here from the sex one, which I could also make bigger, by the way. Make that a little bigger. And go in here, use the arrow to drop down. Why I want to do it, I don't know. Having weird issues with this. If not, I can use my arrows on my keyboard and scroll down to the bottom. Right, so these are the two dates that are wrong. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to agree and pretend we've had a conversation with Catherine Hill, and they've looked back on their surveys and they confirm that yes, 11/19/29/62 was supposed to be 11/19/1962, that someone just miscoded that. So we're going to go in and say, okay, that means we're going to say 11/19/29/62 is actually going to get changed to 11/19/1962. And I'm going to fix my little typo here. Okay. And we look at this 21/1 and we say, well, could that possibly be like somebody messed up and thought it was the day, like the 21st of January, which is like the European way of writing dates. But the 1902, we just don't know how to fix that. So we have really, unfortunately, nothing else we can do on that one other than delete it. So we're going to go, we're going to put a hard return here, carriage return, sorry. And we're going to say, we're going to delete, oops. Oops. What is going to be? We're going to delete the 21/1/1902 record. All right. So we've got a little bit of vertical space in there. So I'm going to just put it like that. And this. Okay. That's fine. Just, you usually don't want to fight with this too much. Okay, so now that we've identified what we want to go do here, and by the way, since this is a video and I'm able to show you a little bit more, we can also put little bullets here. And the way you do that is you hit option 7, add bullets. So you can Google all these shortcuts and they'll show them to you. And so option 7. Okay, so you can get little bullets in there if you want. All right, so 2 records are impacted here. And I'm just going to copy this formula that has that absolute reference to the 200, right? So I'm going to copy this over. And because I'm deleting one record, I want to always keep track of how many records are deleted. So I'm going to add that to my table, and I'm going to say deleted. And here I'm going to put a 1. Oops. All right. So now that we've documented this, again, let's go in and fix it. So we come back to our original data, and we have the records that we've identified the problem in the way the birth date was coded. And we're going to copy those exact records over to our data edits. Come over here to data edits, and I'm going to, again, hover on the left margin so that I get the entire rows. Just, I think, the quicker way to do this. So I come back here to the data edits, and I'm going to go, I'm putting this in, I select cell A8, and I'm just gonna click on that. So I get this, and I see that the first thing I need to do is we're gonna change this birth date. So I'm going to need to do that, but I'm gonna delete this row. So we're gonna break down this data edits worksheet into 2 parts. Maybe I'll come down here to 20, and I'll select the whole row and go up to Home tab. And I'm going to go to the font, find that window borders, and I'm going to select, it's already selected, the thick bottom border. So let's say I do that. So I'm going to separate my worksheet into 2 areas. And down here, I'm going to say the following values, not values, sorry, the following records were deleted. So we want to always keep track of where the deleted records are. So I want to delete this 1902. So maybe what I can do, I want to keep my variable name. So let's just say I copy this whole thing, and I put that down here. And I delete the down here, since the one I'm changing is this one, I don't need it. I'm not deleting it. I'm going to remove it from here. Okay, so now I have the one I'm actually going to delete, and then up here, I'm going to remove it, right? So now I have the record I'm changing here, right? So these are the values where the values are changed. I'm going to go to font, make that bold, and underline it. And here I'll make this bold and underline it. Okay, just keep that a little more obvious. So up here on birth date, I need to put right to the right of it, or somewhere I need to indicate how it's going to get changed. So I'm going to select, I need the space here. So I'm going to move what's there and everything to the right over to the right. So I'm going to go in and insert some space, shifting those cells to the right. And here I'm going to put this is going to change to 11/19/1962. And now this whole box I'm going to highlight with my bucket of paint in yellow, so I can see exactly what is going to be changed. And down below, this record's going to be changed. I'm going to highlight the reason why. I mean, the entire record's going to be deleted, and I'm going to highlight the reason why. So in case I need to just check to make sure this has all been done. All right, so on the left, I don't want to touch the original data. So I'm going to select the clean data, and now I'm going to clean this in the data. Notice this is still got the filters for sex. So I can just come up here to the data button, over to the filter, clear filter icon, and clean that up. I mean, remove that filter. And now I'm going to come to birthday and select the problem values here. All right, so the first one we're going to change, and you could just copy it over, but I'll just type it. Sometimes it makes more sense to copy it. And then down here, row 144, I'm going to select the whole row, right click, and delete this row. All right, so now we have that variable fixed as far as erroneous entries. I'm going to save my work at this point. Coming back to data cleaning, I go to the next variable. Oh, better highlight this in green because we did make some changes. Okay, so now let's come over to college. I need to go back to my original data. let's see what's going on with college. I better clear my filters so I can see everything in college. And I look at college and I see no, PhD, some, and yes. And what we said in class was that this would end up being that, we see a problem because it was supposed to only be, do you have a college degree? And you can remind yourself, by the way, if you're like, what was supposed to be in there? This is where you go to your variable definition file, which, by the way, we've completed ourselves. We would run normally, or maybe normally is not the right word, frequently, a client would give you this variable definition file and what was intended to be gathered in the data. In our case, we had to come up with it ourselves. So we would check with the client before proceeding. So there would have been a check here with the client and not just reviewed by your colleagues. So we'd say, okay, is this all true? Is this the values? And they'd say, yes. College is, was there a college? Do you have a college degree? And the answers should have been only yes or no. So now we come back here and we're like, okay, so then we definitely have some cleaning we have to do for college. So I'm going to select the ones that are problems. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, I'm going to capture them. So we have some, oops. And PhD. Okay. And we're going to decide that some is going to go to no. We're going to understand that some college classes probably means no college degree. And then again, I'm going to do an alt return or an option return. And in here, I'm going to say PhD means yes, they definitely have a college degree. And that's 2 data values. And I want to know how much of my data, I'm going to copy the formula over. Okay. And in both these cases, there's nothing going to be deleted, but I am going to need to fix these. Sometimes it's a good idea not to color it until you've completed it. So let's just leave it white, and that can be the way you kind of keep track that you did do this. So this is just a suggestion, don't highlight it green until you've actually completed this variable and all the steps needed to clean it. Okay, so we are going to capture what's done in the data edits, highlight, create new space, show what it's going to be changed to, and then we'll come back to the clean data and actually change it. And I'm going to let you continue doing that step. The next thing we're going to come down is we're going to talk about the missing values. So for missing, we're going to remind ourselves what's in the analysis plan, which said missing values will be documented, tallied, and the percentage of missing provided, both overall and per variable. So let's take care of that first step before we keep going with anything else. I can quickly switch windows by hitting Alt-Tab, and it gives me options, and I can release once I find the window I'm looking for. All right, so now I'm going to come down here to missing, and I'm going to remove all the filters. And what I'm looking for is if it says blanks for a variable. So customer ID, I see that has no missing. So I'm going to document that I've checked by putting a 0. I look at sex, and there are no blanks. So I'm going to say sex is also 0. I'm going to look at race, and I see that race does have some missing. So I want to deselect the select all, uncheck select all, and check just blanks. And I want to get a count of how many are missing race. So I'm going to come in here to race, and I'm going to say this is going to be count blank, because it's going to count the blanks in this range. And now I'm going to select the first cell that's blank, and then I'm going to drag down this dashed green moving line, type in the closing parentheses and hit enter, and I'll get an 8. Now, because these were absolute references here, I can copy this formula under the 8, and it's going to change automatically, if I select it, you'll see it's pointing to the cell right above where I put the formula divided by the 200, which is exactly what I wanted. What I don't want is the green formatting on this. So I'm going to go up here to the font button, to the bucket, drop down to no fill. Okay, because I don't know yet if I'm going to do anything to change anything with that. Okay, and we don't necessarily know if we've made any decisions. So we've gone as far as we need to go with that. So this is what we need to do with all the variables to figure out the missing